Power Platform Governance Framework, the 6 pillars every enterprise needs. So, Power Platform Governance. It's something a lot of people ask about, and today we're going to walk through it step by step. Next up, what is Power Platform Governance and why does it break down at scale? Power Platform Governance is the set of policies, processes, and tools that control how employees build, deploy, and share Power Apps, Power Automate flows, Power BI reports, and Power Pages sites within your Microsoft 365 tenant. Done well, it prevents rogue automations, data leaks, and compliance gaps without killing the productivity benefits that make the platform worth adopting in the first place. The honest answer to why governance breaks down is that Microsoft's low-code environment makes it too easy to build things. A Power Apps Canvas app can connect to Salesforce, SharePoint, and Gmail within an hour. A Power Automate flow can push sensitive HR data to an external service in minutes. Without guardrails, you get shadow IT at scale, hundreds of apps, flows, and reports that nobody in IT has seen or approved. According to Microsoft's Power Platform admin documentation, organizations that deploy without governance policies experience significantly more data policy violations than those with structured DLP controls in place from the start. Now, moving on to Pillar 1, Environment Strategy and Tenant Architecture. Every well-governed Power Platform tenant separates work into at least 3 environments: development, testing, and production. This sounds obvious, but most organizations skip it and deploy everything to the default environment, which is a shared space with no capacity limits, no DLP defaults, and no deployment controls. The default environment is the single biggest source of shadow IT Power Platform problems. Every licensed user can create apps, flows, and Power Pages development projects in it. Those apps often connect to production data sources before anyone in IT has reviewed them. By the time IT discovers the exposure, the app may have dozens of active users. A proper environment strategy assigns each environment a purpose and restricts who can create resources in it. Developers build in isolated sandbox environments. Tested solutions promote through a staging environment before reaching production. The production environment uses stricter DLP policies and requires an approval process for any new connector or flow addition. Let's talk about now, Pillar 2, DLP policies and data protection controls. Data loss prevention policies are the rules that govern which connectors can share data with each other inside your Power Platform environment. They determine whether a Power Automate flow can, for example, combine data from Microsoft Teams with an external email service or push SharePoint list data to a consumer file sharing tool. Without DLP policies, your automations can freely move sensitive internal data to any third-party connector available in the Power Platform catalog. With proper policies, you define which connectors belong in the business category and which belong in non-business or blocked entirely. Microsoft's DLP connector classification framework covers the full technical setup. The practical application takes judgment. You cannot lock everything down or your citizen developers will build nothing useful, and you'll push them to find workarounds that create worse security gaps than the ones you're trying to close. Now, Pillar 3, a functioning Power Platform Center of Excellence. The Power Platform Center of Excellence is both a team structure and a toolkit. As a team, it is the group inside your IT or operations function responsible for setting standards, running training, and reviewing new solutions before deployment. As a toolkit, it is Microsoft's free set of apps, flows, and reports that give you visibility into what's being built across your entire tenant. The Microsoft Power Platform COE Starter Kit includes over 40 components, an inventory app that catalogs every app and flow in your tenant automatically, compliance flows that request business justification from makers before their solutions go live, Power BI governance dashboards showing risk by environment, and a maker onboarding process that trains new citizen developers before they create their first production solution. Q Services implements the Power Platform Center of Excellence using Microsoft's COE Toolkit as the foundation, then customizes the inventory and approval workflows to match each organization's risk tolerance and compliance requirements. This approach typically cuts the time to COE launch from 3 to 4 months down to 3 to 4 weeks because you're extending an existing framework rather than building from scratch. For a step-by-step walkthrough, our guide on setting up a Power Platform Center of Excellence from scratch covers the installation sequence and the most common pitfalls organizations hit during setup. Next up, now, Pillar 4, Power Platform ALM across environments. Power Platform ALM is the practice of moving solutions from development through testing and into production using a controlled, repeatable process. Without it, you get the classic works on my machine problem applied to Power Apps, a flow that functions in the developer's personal environment but breaks in production because of different connection references, missing environment variables, or connector authentication that was tied to one person's credentials. ALM in Power Platform centers on solutions, which are containers that package apps, flows, dataverse tables, and environment variables together as a single deployable unit. When you build inside a solution and use environment variables and connection references throughout, your solution can deploy to any environment without manual reconfiguration. The most common disaster pattern: a developer exports an app directly from their personal environment and imports it to production, hard-coding SharePoint site URLs, list names, and connection strings in the process. 3 weeks later, a SharePoint migration breaks every app deployed this way. There is no clean rollback. IT spends 2 days manually updating each app. Let's talk about next up, Pillar 5, Citizen Developer Governance and Maker Certification. Citizen Developer Governance works by building checkpoints into the maker journey rather than policing makers after the fact. The goal is to make it easy to do the right thing and genuinely hard to accidentally create compliance risks without anyone noticing. In practice, this means 3 things: a maker onboarding process that sets expectations before someone builds their first app, a solution review process that creates a lightweight approval gate before production deployments, and an ongoing monitoring process that flags apps and flows that have grown beyond their original documented scope. The Power Apps Canvas versus model-driven question isn't purely technical. Canvas apps connect to any data source and can bypass data validation logic entirely since they don't enforce a schema the way Dataverse does. Model-driven apps are built on Dataverse, which provides built-in role-based access control, field-level security, and audit logging that works without any custom code from the maker. Now, let's talk about Pillar 6, Monitoring, Automation, and Continuous Compliance. A governance framework that requires humans to manually review everything eventually stops working. The 6th pillar is what makes the other 5 self-sustaining: monitoring flows that check for policy violations continuously, dashboards that surface risk in real time, and automated nudges that catch makers before they cross a compliance line rather than after an audit surfaces the problem. Power Automate workflow examples for governance include 3 patterns we use consistently. First, a compliance questionnaire flow that triggers automatically when a maker creates an app using a premium connector, requiring them to document the business justification before the connector stays active. Second, a weekly inventory flow that identifies apps with no documented owner in the COE inventory and sends ownership confirmation requests to the listed creator. Third, a detection flow that flags when a Canvas app directly connects to a production SQL server instead of going through an API layer or Dataverse, which then triggers an IT review rather than letting the connection persist silently. These flows use the COE Toolkit's Dataverse tables and the Power Platform for Admins connector. No custom development required beyond configuration. The net effect is that your Power Platform governance process runs continuously rather than only during quarterly audits when violations are already months old. Let's talk about how do you choose the right Power Platform development company. If you're building these 6 pillars for the first time, the scope is broader than most internal IT teams expect. Environment strategy decisions affect licensing costs directly. DLP policy design requires detailed knowledge of which connectors your business-critical systems actually use. COE toolkit installation and customization typically takes 2 to 4 weeks of focused work from someone who has done it before. ALM pipeline setup requires Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions experience alongside Power Platform expertise, which is a combination most IT generalists don't have. A qualified Power Platform development company should show you their COE deployments and the governance metrics that improved afterward, their DLP policy templates for your industry vertical, and their ALM pipeline configuration for solution deployment. References from organizations in your sector matter because governance design for healthcare looks substantively different from financial services DLP policy work. Power Apps development services that bundle governance setup alongside application development are more efficient than purchasing governance consulting after your apps are already in production and the shadow IT has already accumulated. The NIST cybersecurity framework recommends building security and governance controls into the initial design of any system rather than retrofitting them after deployment. The same principle applies directly to Power Platform governance. Built in from the start, costs a fraction of governance applied to an existing ungoverned tenant with hundreds of apps to audit. Power Pages development projects especially need governance from day one, since they expose data and workflows to external users outside your Microsoft tenant boundary. Let's talk about now. Conclusion. Power Platform governance isn't a one-time project. It's an ongoing capability, policies that need updating as Microsoft releases new connectors, a COE team that needs to stay engaged as Maker adoption grows across the organization, and monitoring flows that need adjustment as your business processes evolve. The 6 pillars covered here are interdependent by design. You can implement them incrementally, starting with environment segmentation in DLP, then adding the COE toolkit, then ALM pipelines. But skipping any one pillar permanently creates a gap in your governance posture that Shadow IT will fill. If your current Power Platform governance setup has gaps, start with an audit, understand what's running in your default environment, which connectors your makers are actively using, and whether your DLP policies match your actual data classification requirements. That honest starting point is more useful than a perfect governance framework designed for a company you're not yet.